What's up, you beautiful chuds? Welcome to the Let's Talk Horror channel. Welcome to the Creep Zone, and welcome to Tales from the Creep Zone. This is my side series where I'm going through every episode of every season of the iconic Tales from the Crypt show. As I keep saying on these episodes, I was going to go through them all anyway. Now they're available on Shudder, so why not bring you along on the journey with me? And what a wild journey it's been so far. And if you watched the previous episode, you knew that those 3 episodes that I spoke about were absolute bangers. They were absolutely incredible episodes. So, what's going to happen with these ones? Well, as I say, we're on season 3 already, and on this episode, as I talk about 3 episodes per one of these episodes, unless there's an odd one at the end, we'll soon find out when we get to the end of season 3. But for now, I'm talking about episodes 10, 11, and 12. So let's get right into talking about episode 10. So episode 10 is called Morning Mess, a sleazy alcoholic reporter who investigates a string of murders targeting local homeless people. Um, in this one, so what's commonly sort of happening with these episodes now is we went through the stages of having like the crypt keeper being the crypt keeper, then we go through sort of the stages where the crypt keeper is becoming a little bit more comical, and he's dressing up. Now we're starting to get to the stage where not only is he dressing up, they're getting him to do things while he's dressed up as whatever he is, and now they're putting him into sort of scenarios or actual like sort of places, so to speak, within where he is. They're changing the look of it and so on like that. So it's becoming a little bit more. So obviously, with the episodes, I'm going to tell you exactly sort of what he is. At the start of this one, well, he's dressed as a chef, and basically, he loves doing puns, and he's just doing cookery puns. What's not to love about it? It's the Crypt Keeper. He is iconic. He can do what he bloody wants, and it's always so much fun. But yeah, so this one's called Morning Mess. Once again, we get classic Tales from the Crypt where there's boobs, and it's just there's no reason for it, right? It's just there, and it's a shame, right? I'm just gonna say it. There might be people out there like, what the hell are you talking about? It's just a way that it was in the 80s and 90s, that it shouldn't have been, and it's just a bit of a shame because it's just no reason whatsoever. But once again, that may not be the only time I talk about that in this episode. So once again, this one, as I said, we get that classic sort of setup of a main character, which is what this Tales from the Crypt has done really well. In this one, as I said, we go through the episode like, or how I feel about the episode, but it does do a good job, I suppose, of doing the classic Tales from the Crypt setup where you've got a main character who is basically an absolute dick. They're an absolute douchebag, so you're expecting horrible things to happen to him. And of course, that is the common theme throughout predominantly most of what Tales from the Crypt is, which is also something that's has always sort of set it out to be a little bit different, because so many things, of course, we're following good characters that have bad things happen to them. A lot of the time with Tales from the Crypt, you've got people who are just flat out bad people, male or female, just douchebags, or they are people that might not necessarily be or overly that bad, but might make questionable decisions. This guy in this is just an absolute douchebag. And then also in this, we get Arnold Schwarzenegger's wife from Jingle All the Way. That's what, if you remember this episode, that's what you might remember her from. Um, the main guy in this, who he was also, I can't remember his name, but he was in the mini series, like the TV mini series of Stephen King's The Shining. When they did the TV series, he played Jack Torrance in that. But he has the voice of Seinfeld, but looks like he could be Patrick Bateman. Um, so that I found that quite interesting. What's not interesting though is the fact that this episode is pretty damn boring. Once again, what happens a lot is quite a lot now where with Tales from the Crypt, in a lot of these episodes, they are leading towards the less supernatural side of it and more of a serious tone with a lot of these episodes, and almost making some of them feel a little bit more like a TV drama than a Tales from the Crypt episode. And then they throw in the odd thing, and this one does that, but it's like sort of doesn't really work with it because it's so sort of too far over for what this episode is, because it's, you know, as a concept, there's an idea. The story of this is actually pretty serious, so to speak, not in rather like serious tone and all that sort of stuff. But that's what I mean. It's like it's not, you know, trying to be necessarily a playful episode. It's not like a fun Tales from the Crypt episode. And I would say that the problem is quite a lot, apart from obviously the ones that I spoke about, even though some of those are serious ones. In the previous episode that I spoke about, they were done at the expert level. This isn't, because this is just dialogue heavy. Things are happening for the sake of things happening. They're not like Tales from the Crypt like, or they're not really like supernatural, but I'll get to that. And it just, quite honestly, is sort of flat out boring. It's just, essentially, it's just about a guy being a douche, and then the relationships that he's building and ruining immediately, essentially, around him, because he's an absolute douchebag. So it starts off pretty damn boring. There's a homeless guy that's getting framed for basically the guy that's going around sort of murdering, or whoever it is going around murdering these homeless people. But the actor, he's one of those actors, and I'll speak about this once again in another episode coming, like on here as well. But he's one of those actors that I never remember his name, but I always remember his face. And if you know, I mean, you'll know who I mean if you see the episode, right? And he's always in like a million things, as I said, but you can never remember who they are or their name until you Google them, and then as soon as it comes up, you're like, oh shit. And then this guy, you're like, as soon as it comes up and it says One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you're like, oh, of course that's who it bloody is. How can you possibly forget that? But I did, and I do every time. I'm not very good. I'm not good with names. I'm good with faces, but not with names. Sometimes I'm good with neither of them. In this case, that was it. I knew who he was. I couldn't remember what he's in until I Googled it. But after that, you know, it continues to be boring, right? It sets it up where these things are happening, but then it just goes straight into like a formulaic sort of story where you're just like, okay, this is pretty boring. When are things actually going to happen? But also, like I've said, and like I've said on the previous episode, where some of the episodes were like, you know, serious episodes, a lot of the time it's about how it's done, how it's constructed, that it doesn't always have to be supernatural to work. This is one of those ones where we get to it, it isn't supernatural for a long time of it, and it just is just sort of boring. There's not really much to it. There's not much substance to it. So it just starts off pretty boring, continues to be a little bit boring, and then suddenly the sort of twist that you get from it comes completely out of nowhere, which is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying like it doesn't really sort of suit this episode, because it's a, you know, a very sort of straight episode in regards to like there's no sort of supernatural stuff going on. And the next thing you know, these people end up, basically the twist is that they're like, you see these people in their full form, they take off their faces, and they're whatever they are, sucklings or vampire sort of things. I can't remember. They probably even said what they are. Oh, they're ghouls. That's right. I think they're ghouls, and basically they're just eating people, right? And it's just fucking weird. Yeah, I mean, it's cool to have ghoul. I mean, it's the best part of the episode because you've got ghouls, which isn't, you know, which is cool. You got ghouls in it, and you know the prosthetics, the makeup and stuff looks pretty gnarly. And Arnold Schwarzenegger's wife from Jingle All the Way, she's, you know, not making or eating cookies; she's eating people. But it's wild to see her, you know, rip her face off, and she's got this, you know, full-on head prosthetic, where she's, you know, bald and looks, she's a ghoul. That's all right, you know, like that makes it like sort of all right, but it doesn't fit the episode whatsoever. So overall, 2 out of 5 creepy cackles. Not a good episode. It just really doesn't really know sort of what it's trying to be. I think that's what the main point of me talking about this episode is, that it doesn't really feel like it knows what it's trying to be, because it just has an ending that's sort of completely out of the blue, that doesn't really feel like it fits it, and ends up being the best part of it. But everything else that sort of came before it was pretty bloody boring. So yeah, overall, pretty naff episode. Anyway, let's talk about, hopefully episode 11's better. Let's talk about episode 11. So episode 11 is called Split Second, a bored barmaid who marries a jealous lumberyard owner, only to spark a dangerous affair with a handsome new young worker. Another episode, like I mentioned, I was going to say again, another episode with another actor that you're like, I know this guy from something. In fact, I'm pretty sure I've seen him in loads of things. Who the bloody hell is he? And then as soon as you Google it, because these people, you know, by face, they're very memorable. By name, I have no idea who they are. And then you realise, like, it's the guy that was in, like, he always plays a bad guy. I remembered that much, but he always plays a bad guy. And he was in, like, Blade Runner. He was in Tango and Cash. He was also a serial killer in House 3. So yeah, he's been in quite a few bits, but he is once again a recognisable face, a recognisable villain in most things. But I couldn't bloody remember anything he was in when I was watching it. And then the second you press enter on Google and it comes up, and you're like, of course he bloody is. He's in everything. Um, but ultimately, once again, it's sort of like it makes you. This is another episode that makes you think, sort of think, what the absolute shit is going on. What, because you know, we get narrating, which I hate. I don't like narration in, like, I just don't like it. It's something that takes you out of it. You know, there's ways to tell a story without narration, and unfortunately, we get to the next episode when we talk about that as well. But for some reason, and also it almost feels like a little bit like a cop out sometimes, narration, because it's just like, you know what, like, just try and tell the story within it. I know it's probably quite difficult because, you know, they're trying to they're trying to cram a lot into, like, you know, 30 minutes or whatever. But the narration just always feels like a bit of a cop out to me, unless it really is something that works. You know, like if you put it in something like Stand By Me, for example, you know, you've got the start and then you've got the end, and you know, it makes sense in that because the rest of the film isn't really that. You know, with this episode, it sort of feels like there's too much narration, and it just feels like it's just a bit of a waste of time, because you could be putting that into the episode or doing more things with the episode and telling the story through that, or through that as in telling the story of the character and how they feel through what they can be doing, or telling the story of what is happening in the actual thing through it, not necessarily narration. So yeah, I've spoken loads about narration, basically putting across the point that I really don't like narration. Um, and then this guy, he absolutely bloody loves metal. And then as soon as one of the and then basically there's this episode's got one of the Lost Boys in it as well. Of course, you know, one of the greatest vampire movies of all time. But he turns up, and basically he's the handsome guy, and he turns up, and the problem is as soon as he turns up, you know where this is going to go. And also, it's a bit like what I've already said earlier as well, is that some of these episodes are starting to, like, borderline being those sort of like TV dramas. You know, this one's all about you know, seduction and adultery and all that sort of stuff, and you're like, yeah, but this is Tales from the Crypt, you know, get some goblins and shit in there. You know, and also, as I said, not every episode has to have goblins and supernatural stuff, but it's like when they're actually interesting, when they work, when they're structured and created so well. Like I've mentioned episodes that have. This one is once again another one that sort of isn't for me. It just doesn't really work. And as I said, at that point, you know, you sort of know where this episode is going to go quite early, and then also as soon as, you know, the guy from Lost Boys turns up, one of the Lost Boys, um, you know where it's going to go really from that point on. But I'll talk about the once again the interesting aspect of where it goes as we get to the end. Once again, boobs for no reason. It keeps happening, right? But this is such a weird episode. There's so many things that none of them work. It doesn't really feel like a Tales from the Crypt episode once again. As I said, it's very much like a TV drama of, you know, betrayal and deceit. That's what pretty much all of this episode is until, you know, we get to the end of it. And when we get to the end of it, that's where, a little bit like the episode previously, where, you know, the whole episode is pretty much boring. It's just a story-driven dialogue story, and then we get to the end, which is wild. This ending also is a little bit wild because we have what happens in it is that the guy that's in Blade Runner, the guy that's always a villain. Well, guess what? He's a bit of a villain in this as well, because he ends up making the lost boy blind. And then basically at the end of this episode, the the guy that's the villain all the time, who made him blind, and the woman who's like the main lead of the episode essentially, and she's narrating it all. They put her inside of a tree trunk, and basically get the blind guy. They give him a chainsaw and be like, let's go and cut trees. Essentially, you're so good at it, but obviously he can't see that he's essentially going to be cutting through people, and then he does cut through the guy that's always a villain and everything. I should have written his name down, but I didn't. But the guy that's always a villain and everything, that I couldn't remember who he was. They cut through him, and once again, it's the best part of the episode because you sort of see a lot of it. There's blood going everywhere, and then once again, you're like, that would suck, right? Like that's what makes all like the best or the most interesting sort of deaths, or it's like how it makes you feel because you're like, yeah, that would really bloody suck, you know. I mean, getting killed anyway would suck, but being stuck inside a tree, not being able to move while some guy's cutting you with a chainsaw and he don't even bloody know about it, even though he's got blood spraying all over him, but he's just like, whatever, it's the tree jizz or whatever. You know, it's a fun ending, but not a fun ending. It's obviously dark and sinister, so to speak. But it feels a little bit more like a Tales from the Crypt ending. But the rest of the episode didn't, and that's the problem. That's what keeps happening with quite a lot of the episodes. As I said, the last episode of this side series wasn't like that because the episodes were fantastic. These episodes so far, they're just not very Tales from the Crisp, Tales from the Crisps, Tales from the Crypt-esque until they throw it in, and then you don't want that because it doesn't really feel the same. So unfortunately, the only thing once again that works for this one, is the ending. That's pretty much it. So it's another one that's getting 2 out of 5 creepy cackles because there's not, this isn't a they're watchable, right? Because pretty much every episode is watchable, right? That's the good thing about Tales from the Crypt. Not every, there are some shit episodes, but even the shit ones, they're watchable, right? They're not ones where you're like, I have wasted my life watching this for half an hour. I don't think I've ever really sort of felt like that so much. There are ones that really do suck, and I've obviously in the past I've given them 1 out of 5 creepy cackles, but this one and like the one before it, they're not good episodes. But they have like the odd moment in it, so that's why they're not like in the middle, and giving it like 2.5 or 3 out of 5 creepy cackles. They're just not good enough to get to that sort of level. So once again, this is another one that gets 2 out of 5 creepy cackles. So let's move into episode 12. So episode 12 is called Deadline. Charlie, an alcoholic reporter who commits murder to secure a story only to end up in a mental institution. I mean, I don't even really need to, that's just bloody giving it all away. So thanks, Google. I always go to Google to type in, get the little synopsis sort of thing. That's bloody giving you everything that happens in the episode. So there you go. I don't need to talk much more about it, but I will. The Crypt Keeper intro in this is probably the strongest so far because, like I said at the start of this episode, what's starting to happen is that they're integrating into like surroundings as well as dressing him up now. Sort of the evolution of the Crypt Keeper himself. He's constantly obviously evolving throughout the series and what they're trying to do to him because they realise they're like, oh, the Crypt Keeper is just a bloody legend, and he is. So this one, he's a bartender dishing out drink puns, and of course, it's always fun. I mean, they almost feel like the most fun part of the episode, right? I mean, they're essentially supposed to be. Once again, another very serious episode, another one that has narration. So that already sucks because already you're like, okay, is this episode going to be fun? No, this is not like a fun episode, pretty much at all. Now, once again, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to be a good one, but it's not a fun episode. But once again, narration. Now, the good thing is that the narration isn't necessarily all the way through, but it's at the start and at the end. But it's just annoying, I just feel like it's a bit of a cheap trick, especially in something that's, half an hour, if that. But nice, and this one's another one. So we've already got the fact that it's another serious episode. We've got the fact that it already has narration, which is annoying. And this is another one, which is the 3rd episode now. I mean, all 3 of these episodes are centered around somewhat of a relationship. Which is bloody annoying, right? Because it's just, it doesn't always have to be about that. Like I said, it makes it feel like just like a daytime drama, so to speak, and that's not what Tales from the Crypt is. It doesn't always have to be. A lot of episodes are centered around a relationship, and I mean, to be honest, to be honest, I'm saying that, and I'm thinking in my head about them. Most of the episodes are centered around that, but the problem is a lot of the episodes that are centered around that are shit, and then there's very few good ones. So it's always more fun when it's like going outside of the box, or the whole episode isn't necessarily talking about or centered around the relationship, or that's not like the leading component of where the story goes. Guess what though, another common thing with the last couple of episodes, pointless boobs again. They're just there, absolutely don't need to be, but they bloody are. um the main character is at least a little bit interesting, so that's one of the things with this episode. Out of the three that I've spoken about on these, this is I say it now and we get to the ratings, this is the best one out of the three that I'm speaking about, because at least there is something interesting about the main character. He, once again, he's not necessarily a good guy. He is, like it all said, he's an alcoholic, but there's more to him just being a mean guy that is an alcoholic and is drinking too much, and not necessarily, and he's also not necessarily that horrible to a lot of people that are around him. It's just obviously the fact that he's an alcoholic, but also what makes it interesting is that he obviously he's an older reporter now. He's not getting the work, or he's not as good as he used to be, so to speak. He's not great with the leads, or doesn't have any leads, you know what I mean? So it's more about this down, out of his luck guy, this reporter who's not what he was. Of course, drink has sort of destroyed it all for him as well. So and now he's obviously trying to, in the episode, a lot of it is about him trying to get back on the straight and narrow, trying to get his job back. He meets a woman in it, and he sort of builds up a little bit of a relationship with her, but obviously at the same time he's a bit standoffish as well. So it just means that the characters are a bit more interesting in this, and this guy is a little bit more interesting because you're intrigued to see where the story goes. Now, of course, with it being Tales from the Crypt, you know that it's not going to probably end nicely for this guy, but it's one of those things where you sort of feel for this person a little bit more, because he's more, he's not one dimensional like so many of the other characters that we've had, who are just flat out douchebags or arseholes. This one, there's more dimension to this character. Now, of course, as we go through the episode, and because of something big that happens in it, he does make absolutely an awful decision that he makes, and he does a horrendous act. But once again, it's all about the character, and being on that journey with the character, and then obviously him making that terrible well, not a mistake is it, but doing that terrible thing that he does to somebody, which I'll talk about. But as I said, you're more intrigued by him because he's not just a flat out one dimensional character. There's more to this person, and the performance in it that he gives, he's very good in it. Actually, I do actually like him, and that's one of the benefits of having a good performer, being able to bring out a little bit more, and as I said, not creating a one dimensional character, making a character that's actually a little bit intriguing. He's nice to some people. The alcohol makes him horrible. The alcohol, and the need and desire to not be, an out of it reporter anymore, to be back in the game, makes him make a decision that he should, he absolutely obviously shouldn't make. And that is that basically this episode does take a really dark turn, and I really like how they do this scene, because it's really sort of the way that they film it, and the fact that there's like no music over it, it makes it like feel very unsettling. Sometimes music and sound is so important to horror, but sometimes silence in certain scenes as well can be as important. And I think that that's what's good about this scene, or what happens in these moments. It's really good because there's not really any sound, any music, but basically he goes into like this cafe place, and the guy that's working there, who is like, he, once again, another person that pops up and everything, and he is literally like the walking embodiment of Super Mario, just without a moustache. He's like Super Mario in real life, that got annoyed that he got recognized so much, so he shaved off his moustache in hope that people wouldn't recognize him, and rather than being a plumber, he works in a restaurant or a cafe, whatever it is. But basically, you'll know who I mean. He's in loads of stuff. He pops up. I think I could be wrong, but I think he's the guy who works in the pawn shop in The Crow. Could be completely wrong, but they look very similar. But I think it is him. You can let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, if anybody watches this. But yeah, in this scene, there's not much sound, there's not much dialogue, and all you can hear is like, you know, what this Mario guy is doing to his wife in the background. And then he kills her. But it's the way that you've got this very sort of slow moving camera, hardly any sound. This zoom in on this guy, you know, the old reporter guy, who's sitting there reading the newspaper, and it's just really like, it's very well done, and it makes things a lot more unsettling. And then when he goes to see this woman, then he, you know, the guy's like, he's dead, and rather than, of course, him calling the police straight away, he's basically doing a reporter's job, but obviously the job that he shouldn't be doing. You know, he's dehumanizing everything, you know, and it becoming, you know, the reporter, you know, rather than the human, so to speak, of like, this person's dead and I should be reporting it straight away, right? But when he goes into the room and sees the woman after he's taken his notes and his notepad and everything like that from this guy who literally straight away, which is weird, but the Mario guy is literally telling him bloody everything, even though he's not copies of fucking reporter. So this guy's going to put everything into the paper. Um, he just bloody spills it all to him. So it's a little bit weird, but it's for the story, right? And then when he goes in there, the twist sort of thing is one that, once again, you do see it coming because you don't see her face, but the sort of twist is it's the woman that he's sort of seeing and likes. And once again, this scene like feels sort of like quite dark, quite unsettling because of the way they're doing it. It becomes a little bit more because he then, where she's not dead, he basically strangles her, and you're like, okay, that's pretty fucked up. But once again, it's the unsettling nature of it, and I think a lot of that is down to the craftsmanship because, as I said, they're not really using music. The way the camera is moving is not like fast paced, and it's a very well put together scene, but it makes you feel a little bit unsettled by it, and that's a good thing because it means it's effective. It means it's doing its thing right. Um, so and then you have that, and then of course, as it said in the that's why I haven't gone into it so much, but in the synopsis that Google gave me that tells you everything, he ends up in a mental asylum, which is a little bit weird because I don't really understand the mental asylum bit at the end, because I don't think it, like, he's just essentially he's just a flat out murderer. Like, he's an alcoholic, but he is also just a murderer, so I thought he would just go to prison and not be in like a mental asylum. But once again, annoyingly, then you realise like that's the narration part of it, because at the start he's doing narration, and at the end of it he's narrating it as well when he's in a straitjacket and in the mental asylum. You're like, well, okay, that's the lazy part, isn't it? Because it's the narration side of it, and that's why they have to have it, sort of thing. And once again, I don't like it. But the episode itself is a good episode. It's definitely the best one out of these three, but it's not great, so it's getting 3 out of 5, which is good, right? It's not an episode that I'm going to go, I want to go back and watch this one, so it's not like a 4. It's not one of the best episodes, so it's not a 5, so it can be right in the middle. But it does have that sort of scene, and it's not a quick scene. It's, you know, it's a big part of what it is, because it's essentially you know, what drives us to the end of the episode. But it does have that scene that's very effective, and I really like that. And also, once again, like, it's good that we don't have just a flat out one-dimensional character, and that's done through like sort of, you know, good writing and good performance. And you sort of feel sorry for him in a way when it starts off, and then you don't feel sorry for him because he's does such a horrible thing. And I suppose that's another good aspect of what makes Tales from the Crypt work when it works. So yeah, so Deadline, 3 out of 5. So definitely the best out of these three. But overall, we went from the previous episode, which was just 3 episodes of absolutely amazing, amazing Tales from the Crypt episodes. Some of the best, like probably the best 3 in a row that I've spoken about. And then we go to like 3 pretty shit ones. One's good, the other 2 aren't very good at all. So we'll see where we go for the rest of season 3. I don't know whether we've had the best of it already. I don't know. We will soon find out. But that's these 3, and of course we keep going through season 3, and then once this is done, we go to season 4 and 5 and onwards until there is no more. But I hope that you're enjoying this side series. I'm enjoying it, as I said at the start, and as I keep saying, like, You know, look, I love Tales from the Crypt. It is a huge part of what started me on my journey through horror, whether it's the series and the iconography, the Crypt Keeper himself, or the Demon Knight that I absolutely loved and was one of my early horror memories, and the iconography of the practical effects. Like, you know, Tales from the Crypt has been a big part of what horror is, especially for people growing up in the 80s and the 90s and so on. It was a big part of the iconography of horror. So, as I keep saying, I'm going through it all again. I'll bring you along on the journey, and I hope that you're enjoying it. But until next time, stay creepy, fuckers.